This is a boy that was with a girl that we picked up the other side of Georgetown. They had car trouble and we'd stop and pick them up. The boy had gotten out of the car, was a little ways out in front of the car when Ottis shot him. About 55 miles from here is where we shot the girl at.
This is the Vic Feazell Show podcast, hosted by Vic Feazell and Jonathan Zimick. Sponsored by Moroso Wood-Fired Pizza, Pinewood Coffee Bar, and the law offices of Vic Feazell. Good to see you, Jonathan.
Good to see you, too. We're gathered here today to talk about a brand new case.
Brand new case. It's a case from 1978.
It is.
It's a sad case.
It's a very sad case.
Oh, God, this is a sad case. It breaks my heart just to read about it.
But this is the first case that we're going to talk about here that actually fell into your jurisdiction, Vic, when you were district attorney.
Yes. This was a case of Rita Salazar and Frank Keyes.
Yes.
Two teenagers. They were on their second date. They were going to a movie in Austin. They lived in Georgetown. And Frank borrowed his brother's car. I think his brother's name was Steve, I believe.
Yes.
Borrowed the car so that he could take Rita to the movies on their second date. That's sweet.
It is.
That's sweet. Before they were leaving, Steve says, "Frank, don't forget to put gas in the car. It's pretty low." He goes, "Well, I've only got $6 or $7 on me." And Rita goes, "That's okay. I've got $22.
Nice.
I'll pay for some gas." Some reason they didn't put gas in the car. You know, we can only speculate. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe the movie was good. Maybe they thought they had enough to get back. Maybe Frank just didn't want to borrow money from this girl he was just starting to date.
Yeah.
We don't know. But unfortunately, that car ran out of gas.
On Interstate 35.
Interstate 35. There were a lot of murders up and down 35 back then. There still are.
Yeah.
Or at least bodies being found. So they coasted to a stop north of Austin, whereupon someone picked them up.
Right.
We don't know much about it until the next day when the police up near Waco, near Hewitt, were getting a call because some people had heard gunshots during the night. Right. Sounding like they were coming from the I-35 frontage road.
Right.
Yeah, down the hill from a cafe truck stop kind of place.
Right. I think it was like an eighth of a mile from the truck stop.
And this police officer, it might have even been the chief from Hewitt, drives out there and drives around in the dark, back and forth, looking to see if he can find anything, and eventually finds Rita's body, just Rita. She had been taken 55 miles north,
right,
from where she was kidnapped, and was shot numerous times,
like 6 times.
Yeah,
to the neck and chest areas, arms.
Really sad, and then just left there dead. The driver of the car drove off and then came back because one of the people, after they heard the gunshots, looked out the window and could see the lights go up and then come back, kind of slow down and then take off real fast.
Right.
So I don't know why he came back, but he came back. The body of Frank was found the next day near I-35, closer to Georgetown.
Right.
So he was killed first, and then Rita brought on up to Hewitt and killed up here.
Right.
And we know she was killed up here because the gunshots were heard up here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, Georgetown being the home of our special friend,
Sheriff Jim Boutwell.
Yes.
Drum roll, please. So this was on 11/5/78, November 5th, 1978. The offense report says Frank Kevin Keyes' disabled vehicle was found on I-35 between Austin and Georgetown, Texas. His fully clothed body was found in a rural area of Williamson County. He had been shot 10 times in the head and upper body with a .22 caliber weapon. So that's how Frank was found. 10 times.
10 times.
10 times. And Frank was only a teenager. The body of Rita Salazar, who had been with the victim Key at a movie in Austin during the early part of the night of November 5th, 1978, and was also with him when the car broke down. Her body was located in McLennan County. She had been shot 6 times. You're right about that. And it was with a .22 caliber weapon. Salazar was fully clothed, and she had not been sexually assaulted.
Right. Unlike Frank, which they found a large amount of semen on the exterior of his pants in the groin area.
They found semen on the exterior of his pants in the groin area. Yeah. Now, back then, there wasn't any DNA analysis.
DNA.
All they could tell was that it was semen. They didn't know who it belonged to.
Right.
Ottis Toole. Now, we hadn't talked about that name too much.
Nope, just in passing.
Ottis was a weirdo, man.
He was,
Now, Henry was a weirdo. But Ottis was a much bigger weirdo than Henry.
Yeah.
Ottis was Ottis was ugly, man. He was tall.
Had those big ears.
Big old ears, ugly face, snaggle tooth, scraggly half beard most of the time, but he would cross-dress and go out in public.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Fair.
When Attorney General Jim Maddox and I were working on this case with the grand jury, we sent one of his investigators, a guy named Mike Ferry, down to Florida to interview Ottis Toole.
Oh, boy.
It was interesting. And Mike looked at him, and I think we may even have some of this on audio.
Okay.
We'll look for it. But Mike looked at Ottis, and he goes, I just don't believe that you could ever pass for a woman. You know, I mean, come on. And you're telling me you would go out dressed as females? He goes, yeah, I made a good living at it. I was a prostitute. And Mike kind of shook his head and said, Ottis, that's just hard to believe. And Ottis looked at him, gave him a little wink and said, if I was on the street, I'd get your money.
Oh, wow.
I memorized that line, and I used it on the prosecutor in a Florida case we'll talk about later, where Henry was accused of killing the father of the sheriff.
Oh, boy.
The father was sheriff in a small town in Florida. And I had to go to Florida and defend Henry on that. And I remember, and their main witness against Henry was Ottis Toole.
Oh, really?
Ottis saying that he and Henry had done it.
Right.
And I kept picking on the prosecutor about Ottis, and that if I was on the street, I'd get your money.
Great.
I said, is that really the kind of witness you want to put on the stand and vouch for?
We've got some pictures of him. We'll put them up on the website for this series so people can see what he looked like.
Yeah, see what Ottis looked like.
Get a little image while we're talking on this.
I don't think Ottis could get anybody's money unless they had a really strange fetish for ugly
dudes.
Ugly dudes in a dress. Yeah, real ugly, smelly dudes in a dress. Yeah.
So Ottis was he from Florida, or that's where Henry met him?
He was from Florida, from Jacksonville, and Henry met him in Jacksonville.
Okay.
Now, Toole tells a story about meeting Henry up in Michigan one time, but I don't know if there's any truth to that.
Anything I've read has said that Henry got out of prison, where he was up in Michigan for the murder of his mother, then went over to like the East Coast and made his way down to Florida, and that's where he met him.
He met him at the mission, standing in line waiting for the mission doors to open so he could go in and get some food.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's what Henry told me. He said he had never laid eyes on Ottis Toole until then. And that's when Ottis offered him, y'all, you can come stay with me and my mom and Frank and Becky.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how he met Frank and Becky, too.
They started selling scrap metal together and doing their painting jobs and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of bonded over that.
Yeah. Scrap metal and whatever odd jobs they could do, mostly around Jacksonville.
What's around the street corner?
Around the
Dressed
street
in
corner,
drag.
yeah. They didn't. Contrary to what Colonel Jim Adams says about Henry's driving habits,
Yeah.
Henry didn't drive that much.
Yeah.
I mean, he never had a car that would start. He couldn't afford gas. And he worked all the time. And there are documents to prove he was working. And there are documents to prove when Frank and Becky, Frank Powell and Becky Powell, were in school. They were just kids. They were in school all the time.
Right.
Matter of fact, we have the records to prove that. Well, I don't know if this is now the time to get into that.
I don't want to jump ahead.
Let's not jump ahead.
So Ottis Toole was a friend of Henry's, and he comes into play on this case.
Well, Boutwell wanted this case solved.
Right.
He talked to Henry.
Okay.
He talked to Henry about this case up in Montague.
Really? So during
Yeah,
the
the
same
very
time as
first
the
time.
Orange
Uh-huh.
Sox was going on.
Yeah. And what hadn't come out yet, too, is that Jim Boutwell, Sheriff Boutwell, and Sheriff Conway, they were friends.
Right.
They went way back. And they were on the phone a lot. There's documents to support this. And Boutwell was getting Conway to question Henry about some of these cases.
Okay.
So Henry had already been questioned about them before Boutwell even shows up.
Okay.
And we know how these guys question. They question by feeding facts.
By feeding him pictures and evidence.
Yeah. Well, let me show you a picture, Henry. Well, no, that's not right, Henry.
Just the best way.
Well, now, if you're going to stick to it being 1979, Henry, we're just going to have to quit talking because that's not right.
Yeah.
We've seen confessions. We've even talked about it on this program already,
Yeah.
where that kind of stuff was said.
Right.
Now, in defense of the other guys on the task force, Clayton Smith and Bobby Prince, and in a way Phil Ryan, but Phil really wasn't on the task force. He had just been assigned to do some side things. But you don't see them doing as egregious a thing as Boutwell was doing. Mm-hmm. Boutwell would just basically tell Henry what to say.
Yeah.
And in a lot of these confessions, Prince is nowhere around.
Right.
Clayton's nowhere around. Clayton Smith. And it's Boutwell doing all this. Also keep in mind that during this time, and you brought this up when we were talking about Orange Sox, Henry's lawyers were having problems preparing a defense for him.
Yeah.
Because he was never there.
never there.
They couldn't talk to him. He was always out with some cop.
Oh, man.
Or out with a few cops. Or being flown here, driven there, or taken to this building, shown pictures, discussed. So Henry is looking at murder after murder after murder after murder that he's being questioned about. And yet they're surprised when he's driving down the road and goes, well, yeah, I think I might have done one over there. Wow, gee, how could he tell us that? I mean, holy cow, we checked on it, and there really was a murder over there. Well, come on, guys. He's only talked to like 500 cops already.
Yeah. With
about
with
500.
3,000 confessions.
Yes.
Come on.
So he's already heard about all that. So he's already been asked, did you kill anybody over there? Well, he didn't know anything about it. He didn't take that one.
Yeah.
But then when he's driving down the road with some other cops, and he goes, yeah, I might have killed some over there. And they go, ooh.
Things only killer could know.
Oh, God, they got so excited they'd wet their pants over it. It was just crazy. They were inhaling their own fumes like crazy. Now, back to what I was saying about Prince and Clayton Smith, I think they got kind of stuck defending Boutwell and what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yet they could have come clean. Even after Boutwell died, and Boutwell is dead now, Prince still wouldn't come clean. Yeah. As recently as just a few months ago, he was interviewed again, says he believed Henry killed at least 100, and was really, really remorseful that Boutwell was not here to defend himself because he could do it. Well, no, he couldn't. No, he couldn't. I wish Boutwell were here so that we could put him on a microphone and ask him some of these questions.
Yeah, that'd be phenomenal.
Yeah. But I had the opportunity to ask him a question. I'm telling you, that guy is slippery. He is slippery. And he was so arrogant. Would not answer a lot of our questions. But he felt bulletproof. Because by then I was already being investigated by the feds,
Right.
And the feds were investigating me because they were wanting to support Jim Adams in this Lucas hoax.
Yeah.
You know, the feds were involved in it too. And so by the time the grand jury comes along, man, the feds are after me as well.
Well, like you said in the previous episodes, it's that law enforcement brotherhood.
Yeah.
And those are the guys where that was that era of they really, really dug into that idea.
Yeah, that's one thing we have to do is continually put all this into the context of the time.
Yeah.
And back then, everybody thought law enforcement was squeaky clean,
Yeah.
and they weren't. It was just that thin blue line that you did not cross. You did not violate the law enforcement brotherhood. You supported each other even when somebody was doing wrong, even when a policeman would beat somebody to death.
Right.
They would get no billed for it because their buddies would come in with these alibis and stories, and nobody wanted to believe that the cops did anything wrong.
Yeah.
You know? And that was the problem we were having with Lucas. Nobody wanted to believe the cops would do anything wrong. Well, now we know they do. Thank God for body cams.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I mean, used to, somebody could get the crap beat out of them.
Or have the drugs planted on them.
Drugs planted. And we're seeing less of that now. And at least when it does happen, somebody is being held accountable. Yeah. Before, they would indict the victim on resisting arrest charges.
You and the chief were not good friends back then.
Oh, no, man.
There was even articles in the newspaper about how you two would feud and how
it got so bad. It got so bad. And part of it was my fault. Because like I told you, I drank way too much coffee back then. And it made me real mouthy. The chief of police, his name was Larry Scott. And I remember saying to the press more than once that the city council needs to get rid of Larry.
Yeah.
And make sure they don't replace him with Curly or Mo.
Yeah, that's a little inflammatory.
That's inflammatory. I know. I don't do stuff like that now. At least I try not. I try to learn as I go along. Ever evolving. That's the way we all should be.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ever evolving.
If people could learn from their mistakes, what a better world it would be. But the problem is we keep making the same mistakes over and over again, like Boutwell did on these confessions.
Done. And to bring it back, and we just went on that tangent to prove that we'd already talked about orange socks. And basically, here we are again. We're in the same situation. Same situation.
Yeah, because he did the same thing on Rita Salazar.
Right. Cold case. Unsolved for 4 or 5 years. And now we got some scapegoats.
Got the scapegoats, Henry and Ottis. So he talks to Ottis the first time.
Right.
And says Toole admitted to killing Salazar north on I-35 from Williamson County. Then forcing her out of the car on I-35 and shooting her numerous times. So this is Toole saying he shot her.
Right. And his confession took place, the written confession we have, which we'll post on the website. He confessed October 6, 1983. So we're 5 years into a cold case.
5 years into a cold case. And this is Toole confessing to this after Boutwell has tried to get Henry to confess, and Henry just couldn't guess good enough. If he could have guessed good enough back then,
it would have been him on this confession.
It would have been him. Great. Yeah. So anyway, and did they ever convict Toole of this?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, because Henry comes in later on and kind of takes the heat for it.
Yeah, Henry comes in later and says, "All right, yeah, I did it." So here's Toole though, the first time that Boutwell talks to him, and he's saying he did it. He shot her. Toole does not remember who accompanied him on this particular offense. And Lucas does not admit being present. However, Lucas stated that Toole had described the offense to him. Now see, remember, they allowed, and here's another bad thing that Boutwell did. He had Toole brought to Georgetown.
Okay.
And he let Henry and Toole visit together.
Oh, is that right? Just let them come up with
Holy cow.
Come up with the answers.
He let them visit together and decide, yeah, let's go along with this. Let's have a good time. Let's see how far we can string it. Because I'm telling you, their lives were no good before.
Yeah.
Henry lived in a chicken coop.
He did.
Ottis was eating from missions and grabbing scrap metal, and they were just kind of pitiful. They had it better in jail. And so they were enjoying themselves, keeping this thing moving.
Yeah.
Now, Henry felt justified because he had been forced into it, he said,
Right.
by them making him confess to Kate Rich.
Yeah.
Keeping him in that cell with no clothes and the air conditioner turned up all the way, shivering and freezing. Smelly. Hugh Ainsworth said he visited him in that jail and Lucas was smelly and cold. Hugh said he couldn't stay in there very long. So all these cops talking to him and feeding him all this information.
So that's how Ottis gets brought into it. Is Henry says, "No, it wasn't me," but I think I remember Ottis talking about this one at one point.
I remember Ottis talking.
So then they bring Ottis in, and they'd already talked to each other and decided to confess to everything together now.
Yeah, because Ottis and Henry having to confess long distance and them not really being psychic like Boutwell claimed.
Yeah.
They were getting too much wrong. So Boutwell put them together.
What'd they tell you? Oh, they told me here. What'd they tell you? Well, they told me over here. All right.
So here's Toole saying he did it.
Yeah.
So why didn't they go ahead and convict Toole? They never did.
Right.
And then it jumps on this offense report to on May the 24th, 1984, Lucas located, now get this, from a helicopter.
Really?
He located from a helicopter where the body of Rita Salazar was dumped on I-35 in McLennan County.
Oh, boy.
Well, so not only was he getting to stay in a jail cell, private, with carpet, and a mountain of cigarette cartons and a color TV and art supplies and all of that, but
he's getting helicopter rides?
he's getting helicopter rides. Oh, my God. Yeah, helicopter rides, plane rides. And so he says, there it is, right down there. Now, what does this remind you of? Does it remind you of the ride back from Montague County?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When Boutwell was saying, keep your eyes open, we're getting close. And Henry still had not even said where the body of Ornsocks was dumped.
Right.
Had never even said. But here's Boutwell telling him, we're getting closer. And then the tape recorder is turned on right before they get there.
Yep.
And then Henry stops in mid-sentence and goes, oh, there's where it is. Now I can just see Boutwell pointing.
So can I. And one thing, too, is there's a huge landmark in this. There's a truck stop, and her body was dumped right by the truck stop. So all he has to do is, from a helicopter, if you're pointing relatively near the truck stop, it's there.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what I think, and that's because I've read so many of these documents.
Yeah.
And that's because I've spent a lot of hours in a room with Jim Boutwell questioning him.
You have?
I have, and I did not leave with a good opinion. And I can really see that man in this car pointing to the culvert when Henry says, oh, there it is. Yeah. And I can see him up there in that helicopter. And by the way, Boutwell was a helicopter pilot, too. He knew how to fly. And I think I mentioned before, he was actually in the helicopter that went around the UT Tower when Whitman was on the tower. I mean, in that way, Boutwell was a hero. He risked his life shooting at Whitman to keep Whitman down so he couldn't kill other people.
Yeah.
While an Austin policeman worked his way up the stairs, got in, and actually shot Whitman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to give the devil his due. But he was a bad guy in a lot of ways, even when you put it into context.
Yeah.
That is not the thing to do if you're really after truth, is to tell them your version and make them memorize it. And that's what Boutwell was doing, telling his version and making them memorize it. So this doesn't impress me at all that they say Lucas pointed at the
location of where
Rita
was found.
And you know what? We know for a fact. We'll tell later. Let's build up to this. We'll tell later how we know for a fact that Henry didn't kill Rita Salazar.
Right.
Okay. Or Frank Key.
Right.
And not just circumstantial evidence from the records we have, but we know for a fact. How do we know that? Well, we'll tell you later.
So Ottis Toole, he gives a statement November 5th, I'm sorry, October 6, 1983, Ottis Toole gives a written confession. And were there parts of that confession that just didn't make sense to the crime? Is that why they went back to Henry to clear it up? Or what was said in Ottis's confession that didn't allow him to finish it?
After Lucas allegedly pointed from the helicopter and said, I dumped the body down there, Boutwell and an investigator named Ray Hardinson, they talked with Henry then. Henry then told him she was carrying a sweater. Now, how would Henry know that?
Because he was fed it.
Yeah. And he also gave him correct information about the color of the sweater. And I believe we even have him talking to the Japanese film crew about that sweater.
Was the girl carrying anything?
Yeah, she had a sweater. I think that was in her arms, and I think a billfold or a purse one. I don't remember which she had. And she had the sweater, I know, in her arms.
And so that would be corroborating evidence for the confession. So,
yes.
Wow, Now, remember Ken Anderson on Orange Sock said we have 14 items of corroboration. 14 things Lucas told us that only the killer could know. All right? And we know that's not true.
Right.
We've gone through and studied the interview of the confession, and we found where Boutwell told him every bit of that.
Yes.
And then suddenly a written out confession comes up, and Lucas signs it, and that confession reads like a novel. I mean, it's succinct. There are no holes. But on the interview, there are holes everywhere. It's like Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
And so they're feeding them this information. Now, this offense report says that in October of 83, Toole was actually indicted for capital murder in Williamson County.
Right.
For the murder of Frank Key.
Gotcha.
What happened to that case?
Good
Well, we'll find out and let you know. Thank you for listening to the Vic Feazell Show podcast. And visit us at www.vicfeazell.com for more information. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Drive laid back and lower your speed. 1877 with Vic.